Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of your legs are still in one piece. I hope everybody's had a good KBIS and IBS so far. I know this conversation sounds like it should be a downer. I actually wanted to start out by asking if somebody wanted to take a guess at the number of FEMA-declared natural disasters in the US in 2019. We're just coming off of 2019. So we don't need to go as far as Australia. But anybody have a guess how many natural disasters declared by FEMA, which means, people were put out of their homes by this disaster in 2019? Come on. Numbers, people, numbers. 40. OK, that's a good guess. 40 is a lot. Yeah, what? 26, OK.
I don't see anybody Googling.
30? Did I hear 30? OK. So most people are thinking 1 or 2 a month, right? You have it right, actually. It's 101 declared natural disasters in the United States. Wow. That's just, the 50 states and, the outlying islands. 101 natural disasters. OK, so that's good. So clearly, it's something we should be thinking about, right? It's something we should be thinking about. But here's the thing. When you build a home, you don't build it thinking about the day it's going to burn down. True? Right? I mean, nobody wants that juju around like their first home, like their forever home. That's not where your mind wants to be at, right? So I think today what we're going to do is talk about resilience and talk about good design, but talk about it not so much keeping in mind the 101 natural disasters that hit the US in 2019, but also just in terms of, just how resilient design is just good design. It's just good sense, right? It's just it's in many cases a return to responsible design and business practices, right? And so once we start thinking about resilience in that way, that's what the word resilience means, right? It means something that's done so well that it stands the test of time, right? That it's flexible, adaptable. It can, kind of deal with the bad things that happen, but also is there for you in the good times, right? So we're going to keep the good times and the bad times in mind as we talk today. I have a fantastic panel in front of me, but before you get to know them, we kind of want to get to know you guys. You thought numbers was the only thing you were going to scream at me? OK, so I just want to put your hands up. How many folks here are interior designers? OK, we have like 4 folks. Great, 5, 6, great. How many folks here are architects? No? OK. How many folks here are contractors or in construction or building? Yeah, we have, great, wonderful. How many folks here are in development or are property owners or landlords? All right. OK, we have a few folks there. How many people are in product manufacturing? A couple of folks. OK, great. So we have a pretty good representation of the building industry here. How many folks here would say that residential design, either new home construction or home renovation, is the biggest part of what they do, no matter what kind of sector they're in? OK. So, and commercial work? So folks, what do the rest of you do? Sorry. I'm kidding. You're all welcome. OK, so we have a sense of who we're talking to, right? And now I'm going to get these folks to tell you who they are. We'll start with Laurie here. Laurie, tell us a little bit about yourself, but also tell us about how can we in the design industry, and there's a diversity here, how can we start this conversation about resilience if we're not having that conversation already?
Sure. So my name is Laurie March. I work in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. I'm a residential project manager. And more recently, I do a lot of work with brands and really helping them to understand how homeowners make decisions and what drives the choices that they make in the marketplace. I think for me, first and foremost, resilience is a personal conversation. Many of us come to an understanding of resilience in something in our lives happening maybe you caught something on fire in the kitchen or your neighbor's house burned down. So you tend to understand resilience personally first. Maybe you're in a region that has hurricanes, so you grow up understanding that like this is a behavior that our family, this is how we keep safe in a hurricane. Personally, for me, I recently lost a home in a California wildfire. And the conversation gets really serious when you're standing in the ashes of something. It strikes you in a whole different way. So I think most people have an awareness of resilience, and I think all of us are pretty tapped into what's happening in the world, but it doesn't anchor itself in our lives necessarily until it becomes personal, I would argue.
Right. I think, and that's true of so much of the due diligence we do in building systems, whether it's, fire safety or other things, you kind of have to see it from that personal point of view to care.
Yeah.
So how do we get people to care? Shannon, I'm going to bring you in on that. Tell us a little bit about your practice, as well as, sort of how have you started to have those conversations about resilience? How do you get people to care? How do you get people engaged in that conversation?
Yes, so I'm also in Southern California, and we were recently, my practice is remodel and full furnish of architecturally significant or historic homes primarily. And so I'm constantly in contact with people who are looking at an older home and bringing it up to date in all things. So that's kind of a key position to be in. And like Laurie, I recently, our community in which I'm in leadership was very severely impacted by the Woolsey fire. So we lost about 1/3 of homes in our community. And because I'm in leadership there, it made me very close to each individual's needs and the various overall community steps that we can take. And as a build community, the steps that we can take together, sort of like how a hairdresser would check your head for moles to check for skin cancer, and then they'd say, oh, I saw something on your head, you should go get that checked out by the doctor. That happens now. I don't know if you've had it happen to you, but hairdressers, stylists are receiving training to do that. I feel like all of us in our industry are a point of contact that we can take steps to help communities and people bounce back from the things that can happen. So in our case, one of the things we could do is just say, hey, we're making significant changes to your home, and that has a value. We're upgrading the value of your home. You might want to check with your insurance agent if that value is covered by your coverage at this time, the additional value. So that's just one easy thing. Many, many people were underinsured, and that's causing them an enormous hurdle to getting back home, meaning the land that their home sat on. So that would be an important step to increasing resilience. And it's a way to get people to think about caring, but still being excited about what they're doing to their home.
Definitely.
Right, absolutely. Insurance is so important. I mean, I know, you didn't think you were coming to a design panel and talking about insurance, but insurance is such an important thing, not just from the fact of, whether you're insured enough or, you're covered enough by your insurance company, but also insurance companies have a really interesting way of thinking about risk, right? And they have a really interesting way of thinking about disasters. And we in the build community need to start understanding that way of thinking, right? It's like when you insure something, you're insuring it essentially against its loss, really, if you think about it, right? And so it's a way of thinking about value. How much would it cost me if I lose this thing, right? And so we don't think about that when we think about our homes, right? And increasingly, it's 101 events, guys, across the United States. I'm not kidding. 101 events that put people out of their homes, right? And when we're talking about that scale, it's coming to a neighborhood near you pretty soon, right? And so we need to be prepared. Just thinking about, just having that eye, right, of like, you see something and you know that it's not really right for the place that it's being designed for, right? How can we be that hairdresser who can pick out a mole that looks suspicious, right, in the build community? How do we build that skill? And I think Lara is the best person to talk to us about that. Lara, tell us a little bit about yourself, but also tell us about, exactly that. Like, how can we start looking at building systems in a different way through this lens of resilience?
Oh, that's such a huge topic. Anyway, hello everyone. I'm Laura Muller. I'm from Los Angeles, and I too am a neighbor in the community of Southern California who have withstood the fires. And for me, we had 4 clients who actually lost their homes, and from one end all the way over to the coastline in Malibu. So it impacts, another way to look at it is not just impacting that family, but it's impacting those resources that are serving that family and vice versa. So I think community is, of course, always the heart of any kind of forward motion. And I think that grassroots element goes into building systems as well. I'm a general contractor and an interior designer in Los Angeles, and I have a boutique residential and commercial design build firm, and we do 3 or 4 master projects a year, and most of the others are just there's a great demand for great project management, so we do that as well. I would have to say, as far as taking resilience into building systems, I think we have to stop thinking short term. I think we need to start building into the conversation a standardized expectation of how we live in the next 100 years. And you can't change it overnight, so you have to change it a little bit at a time. The only people that are going to change that are in this building right now. So thinking about building systems that are more modular and more flexible, that can be reused in 5 to 10 years, that have more modular bones, for lack of a better term. There's also things to think about as far as building materials, such as the new insulation and the new taping methods that are coming out now, which can actually trap your healthy air and maintain it longer in some sort of an electrical outlet or outage or some sort of other disaster. So I think the most important things for me as a designer and a builder is to take a look at my local people, my local labor, my local resources, my local materials, and try to keep my building means and methods and practices as local as possible. So in the event of a disaster, I'm not waiting for somebody that has to get on an airplane to come down and kind of be a specialist here. And I think that builds community, it builds trust, it builds, it's just a better brand for our country to start thinking about those kinds of things. And then for me, that also goes back into trying to develop systems in our educational system that supports us who, there's such a wide distance between some of the new contractors that are coming out without having gone to shop in high school and apprenticed in, the local trades markets, right? Sorry, my bad. But if we, as responsible engineers of buildings, we think about and designing them and making them beautiful in ways that are more responsible to the 100-year long-term plan, that means we all have something to offer the educational platform, creating ways for young people to come up with a better building practice, mindfulness. And then as a result of that, as a byproduct, we think that the building standards, there will be a new level of grassroots expectation, and then everyone will follow suit. Stay current on that information on the building codes. In Los Angeles, I mean, we're pretty much in a closet with as far as what we can and cannot do. So it's very highly dictated, would you say? So we have a lot of framing in our building systems in Los Angeles, but we also have, dare I say, a wastefulness in our city that is kind of epidemic. And I think that we as contractors need to definitely push the educational level and speak to it. Like Laurie says, the more you can talk about it, the more you can have those intimate conversations, the more we can start expecting it and step back and not worry about the cheaper guy that's going to get in there right ahead of you and take the job, and then 50 change orders later, you're still not in a resiliency-minded building. So I think there's a lot we have to do. We have to work with our architects. Designers have to work closely with architects. Architects have to allow that conversation. We have to talk with our contractors, and we really have to start coming together to collaborate. I think collaboration is going to be key in this, than the next 100-year plan.
Laurie, there was so much that you said in that I think we need to come back to that. So we talked about, you know, making resilience personal. We talked about resilience in community. You built on that, right? So you started with this idea of community, and then you're talking about how resilience is something really local. And, you know, this is a really interesting thing. So at Metropolis, we cover sustainability and resiliency all the time, right? And sometimes people think that resilience is the big picture stuff, right? Like when a flood hits or whatever. Actually, resilience is the most local form of sustainability. If you don't know how a fire is going to spread on your hillside,
Yes.
you're not prepared for a
That's
fire, right? Sustainability tends to be like, you know, the world as a whole and saving the planet, whatever. But resilience is very much about the here and now. And it's actually the part of sustainability that, as designers, we can actually get involved in the easiest in a way.
That's right.
And
It's very accessible.
It's very accessible. The other thing you said is about the building trades, right? And again, this is like it's a soapbox that we're on. You know, we can't do this without the trades. So everybody who's in the trades in this audience, we need you. We need you to keep us safe, right? And unless we build those new skills and we start to, you know, really start to teach people, we're not going to be in safe homes, in safe offices, in safe hospitals. You know, we can't build safe communities and resilient communities without all that. So there's a lot. We're gonna return to some of those pieces in a minute, but I want to bring Chris in here. Chris, you're coming just off of working on a couple of retrofit projects post-disaster, right? So you've pretty much seen this whole cycle now, right? Like, so you've seen the conversations about resiliency, the lack of those conversations, what that can cost people. You've worked with clients who are dealing with that right now. Just tell us a little bit about, you know, from an architect's point of view, how you're approaching resilience in your work.
Sure, thank you, Avi. Yeah, I'm Chris Brandon, founder of Brandon Architects. Our base is in Orange County, so we're in Southern California as well. And we've been blessed to do a number of projects, kind of all over our area, but now we're starting to reach other pockets of the nation, of the country. But yeah, we most specifically over the last few months, we've got some projects that are complete rebuilds of houses. One was lost in the Malibu fire. The other one just a couple months ago in the Kincaid fire up in Sonoma, which is really tragic. So we do have an intimate knowledge of the kind of the rebuild process that's going to happen after a disaster like that. But we also work in an area where we plan for lots of calamities, not just fires. There's floods. We do a lot of work in Newport Harbor, where we're thinking about, you know, things that are going to happen 75 to 100 years from now, like
Right.
sea level rise. Flooding, you know, storms getting stronger, things like that. We've also got earthquakes, which, God forbid, you know, we haven't had to worry about in a while, but it's something that we always design for. And then landslides is another thing too.
Yeah.
That you know, not to focus on all the doom and gloom, but you know, we work in an area where we just really have to think about some of these big, you know, nasty things that can happen. And I'm happy to kind of, you know, throughout the discussion today, kind of talk on those points as more from like an architectural standpoint. But for us in our practice, the way we look at resiliency is more from like a socially responsible building, you know, viewpoint, and which a lot of you guys have hit points on already, which is great. But we also look at the resiliency in just kind of the more of the day-to-day or the year-to-year aspect of our homes too, like how are they going to stand up to the weather? And as you build for longevity, it's something we always try to get our projects and our clients to shoot for. You know, because you don't always think about, you know, a total loss of a home. A lot of times it's not. It just might just be a portion of it it's burned, or you might just get water intrusion from a really nasty storm. You know, so there's lots of conversations, lots of very detailed conversations about different aspects of resiliency when it comes to building a brand new custom home.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we have a all California panel. If California had hurricanes, it would be like, you know, just
The only one
Have
we
it
have.
the disaster bowl of the United States.
At this point,
Yeah.
we'd say, bring it on.
Bring it on.
We talk about that. I mean, it's so funny because our parents, if your parents were born around 1940, to reveal my age, that's when my parents were born, around 1940, they were in a world with 2.3 billion people. We now live in a world with 7.7 billion people. Let that sink in. 7.7 billion people. So we think about this topographical advantage of areas that are less prone to disaster, it's not feasible that we can stay only in those areas when we're 7.7 billion people. So that's just a little part of piece of the puzzle that makes it so drives home how important it is that we become resilient.
Right. I think one of the good things about California is, because it is also one of the most densely populated states in the country, right? So you have this, pardon the pun, perfect storm of, fire, earthquake, flood, landslides, and then on top of that, really densely populated areas, right? And so California currently has, some of the most stringent building codes in the country. And I think a lot of dealing with resilience is also dealing with just code and regulation and making sure that you're, sort of you're following good business practices, but you're also following the rules, maybe sometimes doing a little more than the rules mandate. I'd love for all of you to just maybe respond to that a little bit from your own points of view. How do you deal with sometimes the resistance from clients or from homeowners, being like, well, why can't I have a patio there, right? Or why can't I have an all-glass wall here? Why can't I have a full French door on this face of my house?
That just goes right back to education. It just goes back to being totally informed and working with your trades, working with your architects and your designers and your builders, because there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And I think if the education is there and we can pencil it out in some kind of here's 5 facts why you don't want to build that there,
Right.
and create some sort of a subliminal understanding that these are the 5 things that you want to look for, and we can adapt to that as a standard on some level, then I think the conversations are going to be much easier. I think the client and the clientele will evolve right along with the information, but pencil it out and show them. I think it's very visual society that we live in now, and I think people need flow charts. So if you can make a flow chart based on your trade or based on your service that provides them with some sort of here's a return on that and here's your return on this, I think the mentality is that they don't want to throw money away. So clearly they just need to understand.
Right.
Yeah, and I think codes are great. They sort of give us a level playing field.
Totally.
But it's important to remember that they're the low bar, right? Like they're the standards that we all have to rise to. But we really try to understand the spirit of the way the codes are written, so that we can do things kind of above and beyond that. They're sometimes they're pushed on us or forced on us, but they're always kind of trying to elevate the overall design and the intent of those. And when you start thinking about some of the disaster-related codes, like the California is great that we're pretty sophisticated and we've come up with some great things. Pages and pages. I don't want to bore anybody, but the Chapter 7A, we deal with that a lot as architects. It's basically what are we going to do on the outside of this home to prevent it from catching fire in a wildfire? And it's pages and pages of great information. But walking a client through the spirit of that code and really why they can't choose certain materials, building materials, have a certain kind of roof on the home. You can really kind of drive it home in more simplistic terms so that they can understand. That's important.
Yeah, we've all been there. I feel like it can be really hard to have a you can't do this conversation with somebody, right? It just in general, right? That's just the toughest conversations we have as professionals. Laurie, can you give us a pointer on that, maybe? How do we frame those conversations with people?
I feel like for me, I like to think about the sort of Maslow hierarchy of needs in your clients, right? So like, are you solving an emergency when you're working on a house? Like, has something burned down? What emotional state is your client coming to you in? And I like to start there, right? Like somebody who's like ready to do their dream remodel is in a whole different headspace than someone who's in a crisis or living through a lot of stress. I think you can really begin there and connecting with your client and understanding what headspace they're in before you tell them that they can't have what they want. It can help you really set it up in a better way. So, you're relating to them first, right? I totally understand that a huge bank of doors here would be incredible, and I could see why you would be so drawn to that, and that would be wonderful. And here's some of the reasons why it doesn't actually work. And I think before sometimes we know so much more than our clients, and it's so easy to be like, well, no, it's not going to work. You can't have it, And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But if you can identify their emotional state, are they like, this is a fulfilling, dream project for your client? Well, they're in a wonderful place, and they're going to be even more annoying to deal with because they want everything, right? Top of the hierarchy, they want everything. But when somebody's in crisis, sometimes it's a little bit easier to just say, hey, I hear you, I understand, and here's how we can plan the right things for you, but I don't want you to be in trouble later because this won't work. So.
Laurie, you just make such a great point about the fact that you just proved the fact that why interior designers have to be educated on the materials and the longevity of the joinery and how things are going together construction-wise. More than just it's going to look a certain way, but how is that going to operate? And the only way we can do that is to look it up and figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, interior designers, I think, I know there's few interior designers in this audience, but almost everybody works with an interior designer at some point, right? And interior designers are really that battlefront, if you want to talk about it in that way, just because they deal one-on-one with people's lives, right? They're dealing one-on-one with somebody's life, right? And that's why you started us off, on something so personal. I think that's really important to note. Shannon, by the way, there was a really dramatic picture there of the hillside around your home on fire.
It's true. The homes around us all burned down. It was very, very tragic.
Oh my
But the
God.
people are okay. We didn't have any loss of life in that area, so
That's
that was
crazy. I wanted to bring you in because so much of your practice is in renovation, right? So you're dealing with so it's fine to build a flood-proof home if you're starting from scratch, but if you're dealing with a 50, 60, 80, 100-year-old building, that can be a challenge too. And so much of our business. We know the renovation industry in the U.S. is growing. It's still growing. It's going strong. It's growing by leaps and bounds. We're not going to stop renovating anytime soon. So how do we bring resilience into the renovation industry?
I love that question. I'm so glad that you asked me that. So I live in this area that has these wooden cabins, right, in the mountains of Malibu. And then also a lot of Malibu has wooden cabins and stucco homes with fabulous landscaping all around them. And I think, again, it's literally about every single professional that clients come into contact with on their path in their renovation are being cognizant of the fact that this is being sold in a high fire severity area. This is just fire. But the same goes for wood floors in a basement in a hurricane area, right? And by the way, I'm the person who wants all these things. I want outdoor drapes. I want to put wood floors in my mother's house and a paneled library in, Hurricane, Massachusetts. It should literally be called that. I want to do those things. But the experience and the knowledge tells me better. So we all have, when we have our different points of contact, the ability to say, oh, have you considered? So I recently got to work on a Spanish home in Malibu that someone had done a fairly responsible landscape design on before, because there's nothing flammable for 30 feet. It's perfectly done. And it's a different look. And I think Laurie has some thoughts about that. But things like boxing the eaves in the remodel if you're addressing the roof, and things like limiting things that are combustible right around a home and making sure that you're not putting a planter right up against a wood wall. These are the things that save homes. And then also maintenance, making sure your clients are aware of what kind of maintenance, whatever you have to offer them, is going to require. It's very important. Our house had been freshly painted, and we also happen to have Ipe. I know it's not popular for all the reasons in sustainability conversations, but it is fire-rated wood. So we had decking made of Ipe, and that probably helped our house survive.
I'm actually going to have one last set of questions for the panelists here, and then we want to bring you guys into the conversation. So if you have any questions related to resilience, sustainability, as you can tell, this panel would be very happy to engage with those. So if you can start thinking about things that maybe you want to bring to the discussion, we'd be happy to take some questions in a few minutes. But before we go there, we're here at the Builder Show and the Kitchen and Bath Show, okay? And I just want to talk about kitchens and baths for a second. Kitchens and baths are, people spend a lot on kitchens and baths now. Per square foot, people spend more on kitchens and baths than they do on almost any other part of the home. And so how do we start to bring some resilient thinking into those areas? Because kitchens and baths also are places where pretty much the plumbing is coming in, the electricity is coming in, the heating is coming in. I mean, that's a spot where there's so much happening in the back end of the home as well. So just thoughts on kitchens and baths and resilience, if you can.
Well, I think anytime, California, we have very restrictive codes on water flow. So, but there are now new codes with water capture and, setbacks and how you drain. And so there's a lot of things that we're learning every 3-4 months. We learn something new about how to capture and upcycle or repurpose. So I
think they're, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the kitchens are sort of like a little epicenter of the home where, like you're saying, a lot of these systems are coming together. And when we think about the systems, we do have to kind of consider the whole home. But there are a lot of things that you can do to make those systems more efficient and more socially responsible. California just updated their big energy code in January that we were prepared for. And it's because our energy grid is getting a little more green, there's a lot more solar power in it now. They're actually shifting away from natural gas. And so I think you're going to see that in a lot of appliances hit the kitchens. I think even in Berkeley, I saw in the news that they just flat out, denied any ability to use gas appliances because they're, worried about the green, the carbon emissions now. So it's kind of interesting how things are evolving from a code standpoint. But yeah, basically think about how much time you spend in your kitchens and how much energy you spend in your kitchens. A lot of people don't know, like the refrigerators are one of the most energy-sucking appliances you've got in your house. So.
I go right back to the insurance piece because when clients are spending money, so if you're selling a client an $80,000 appliance package, you might think to say, hey, check your insurance coverage, make sure you're covered for this big addition to your home you're doing. It's just it's a way to increase community resilience because when people are underinsured and can't rebuild, that harms the tax basis, that harms the whole entire system, and also it just goes on and on. Absolutely. So that's a big piece. And then clean burn. I think using products that burn clean all the way down in a high fire severity area makes sense. And then mold resistance in places that flood, because a lot of the problem when people are evacuated after a hurricane is that they can't get back in to dry out the house. And so mold takes over, and then they end up with a total loss with a house that could have been a partial loss. So that would increase community resilience as well, interior materials choices.
I think too in the kitchen and bath, resilience can be so small, right? It can be a leak detection device. I was just looking the other day, this tech has come so far. It's like $300 to add one, This is such a tiny little thing you can do. So even if somebody's coming to you to do a pretty makeover of a kitchen, it's not even that deep of a remodel, you can still have a really important conversation about air quality, about leak detection. To me too, carbon monoxide detectors in the home and smoke detectors and just that, all of that has come so far, and they're tiny little conversations. But every time somebody experiences the carbon monoxide detector going off, well, crap, they know so much more now. And this person is then more aware going into the next conversation. So I do think it's little bite-sized nibbles, and then you don't have to boil the ocean and solve all of our crises at once, but you do feel really confident that if your house has a leak, you're going to know how to shut it off and what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, how you interface with the home.
I was just going to interject a little story, but I had a client over the holidays, really tragic loss to his basement level in his home. It's a brand new home. He got to live in it for about 6 weeks. Beautiful home, and they had a leak on the inside. It's these houses are getting so complicated. There's so many different systems. It happened to just be a very small accident with the radiant heating floor system. But he went out of town, and he was gone for 6 days, and it probably happened like an hour after he left the house. But if he would have had a very simple leak detection system to alert, his builder or somebody, he could have saved a lot of heartache because he had about 6 inches of standing water in his basement. For the whole 6 days he was gone on vacation, and then
Oh, that's terrible.
yeah, and then you do have to think about the mold, the remediation, so like
yeah.
something that could have been solved quickly. But we do have a lot of clients. It's like a second home for them in certain areas too, especially in fire-prone areas like Sonoma and the country. So.
It's back to what you said too about. Oh well, now I lost it. I don't know. But
I was going to say too,
it was so important.
based on all this, that technology we can use it to assist us in resiliency. Even though I was just speaking to somebody in another booth asking about how much is emitted from this, having this keypad in every room and having it on your phone, and what kind of privacy and security we have, and how does that build into the resiliency plan. But I do think that detection systems on any level, you have to pick your battles. Would you rather not have your house burned down or somebody in? We do so many preventative things that technology is just going to adapt to that too. So as designers, that's just part of the conversation now, and it's becoming more standard.
Right.
I mean, in the last 2 years, I haven't done a space that didn't have the technology and the you could talk to your phone and you'd talk to the wall and it'll turn on the shower, and then what's more private than the other, and what are those laws about? It's such a huge topic, but I do think that technology is going to be a big subject in the next moving forward, and it's going to be move resiliency forward in some way.
I remembered it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was getting back to the part about how we are each other's resilience. So a lot of the hurricane affected area designers that I spoke to before this panel told me that one big thing that they worry about is their clients' ability to bring things that can become projectiles, death projectiles, furniture. So they say, all right, well, here's my client. They're over 65. They're not here all the time, and I'm selling them this furniture to be outside. Is it light enough? If there's no help, because everyone in that whole area knows that a hurricane is coming, how are you going to call someone and hire them to bring that furniture into that garage, right? So they have to think about, they're going to sell them furniture that's lighter, just as in our high fire severity zone, we're going to sell less likely to burn furniture, or furniture that won't catch an ember, and et cetera, et cetera. So we help each other's homes not burn. We increase each other's safety by our thought into who is this client that I'm interfacing with right now, and where do they live, and what is the true depth of their need.
I think, too, the confidence of knowing how to use your own home. So as a designer or a builder, when you hand the keys to that homeowner, there's a couple of quick questions. Hey, is there a fire extinguisher in the house? Do you know how to use it? Hey, do you know where your water shut off is? Let me show you. I want to show you how to turn it off. Do you have a teenager in the house? Show them, right? Because we're not always home all the time. So I think everybody in the family, knowing where the smoke, knowing where the fire extinguisher is, knowing how to shut off the water, how to turn it off behind the toilet if something's, you realize something's gone wrong. Sometimes waiting for somebody to come fix it for you, you've far more problems happening. So giving our clients the confidence to know a couple of things about how to really make their home in the moment, this quick thinking can really give them, that basement. Oh my gosh, that makes me so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that leak detector can detect any toilet leaking, any little thing. And so it would have sent him an alert on his phone. Maybe he could have called a neighbor, somebody could have popped by with a key and started the problem. I think some of them you can even shut them off from
Your phone.
From your phones.
can.
You shut off your
Yep.
water. Oh my gosh, that's
Exactly.
so exciting. So I think having the confidence, giving our clients the confidence in their own home is so important too.
And gaining this knowledge as a provider of some service, whether you're a trade or whether you're an interior designer, whether you're a builder or an architect, that at this point, you're at that moment of launching, that launch pad of resiliency in the conversation, even though it's been in develop for quite some time. I think right now it's a social word. So I think if you can be in on that knowledge, you become an invaluable resource to consult on these subjects as an interior designer or trade, whatever, knowing your product. I think that is going to bring your business more profit. It's going to make a better world, and it's going to build a better community. So I do think that being informed and talking about it, putting it out there, and providing that service as a consultant is going to be huge for profit in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. I mean, I think to reiterate, some things that all of you have said, first of all, on the technology piece, the cover of next month's Metropolis is actually a post-occupancy device that was developed by an architecture firm where they developed one sensor box that can detect 7 different interior design criteria, so air quality, carbon monoxide, temperature, so on and so forth. And they built it themselves. They're using it in their projects. They've released the plans open source. So there's a lot of things that people are doing to bring down the energy costs of the technology, to your point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, make it simpler to use and make it kind of, foolproof. So that's happening all the time. So a simple thing like that, like bringing in the technology into your home, can be huge. But also being each other's point of resilience, right? So acting in good faith for the community you're in, there's nothing to replace that, right? You have to act in good faith. If we don't all act in good faith, we're kind of giving up our professional responsibility in the first place, And if you're an architect, I mean, you've signed to the AIA Code of Ethics. If you're an interior designer, the ASID or IADA have their own codes of ethics. If you're a builder or a contractor, you're bound by code to have certain conversations. So have those conversations, right? That's important.
Love that.
And I think the important thing is that we all need to be that resource. We need to be that first point of contact. If we all start to educate ourselves and have those conversations with people, we're paying it forward. Because we're talking about design saving lives with resilience, but it also saves money, as you said. And
the planet.
that can be a good motivator. Everybody wants to save money, even if they they don't want to think forward to the planet or to the community and so on and so forth. So. We're ready for some questions or comments or suggestions from you guys. Anybody want to engage in a discussion, say anything at all, please, this is your time to jump in. Just put your hand up and we'll respond to anything that you have to say.
We did so good. Look, they have no questions.
I know they know all about
Like
it.
lunchtime.
That too.
Maybe they're all asleep.
I do have some, I have a last set of pointers from these folks, but anybody would like to comment, or we'll keep going and then you can jump in whenever you feel comfortable. Anyone? So
It was the chair.
it was a chair. Just we've had a really great audience patiently listening to us. If anybody in this audience had to go, if somebody's interested in getting more involved with resilience, what would be a good first step for them? Maybe let's start there, and then if you guys want to react to that and say, that's nonsense, please jump in. Okay? Go ahead. Who'd like to start?
I can start. I mean, maybe just from the architectural standpoint again. It is important to educate yourself, and with respect to like the wildfire thing specifically, and some of those codes, the technology is evolving, and there's a lot of great products out there now that it's just really hard to keep up on that. But there are a lot of great products. I'm sure a lot of you out there know that, or you might rep for some of them. But no one really wants to live in a concrete bunker. Like that's the ultimate design response to wildfires and some of these crazy calamities. But we want to have that rustic Malibu farmhouse vibe or that look, and there are certain things you can do with technology to still kind of achieve that look. There's still some things that are just flat out not a good idea, but the industry has really kind of risen to this challenge as it's become more and more prevalent and more obvious that we're going to have to face more and more of these disasters, that they're putting products out there and things that still look great and will meet these code restrictions and things. But like I said, it's always important to really understand not just the letter of the code, but what the intent is. So sometimes putting like a wood planter next to the home after the whole thing, and the inspector signs off on it, and it's all perfect, but you attach that cute little wood trellis or something at the end of the job. It's not going to work out. So that would be my suggestion, is to just really, to rely on the community to bring you some of these great new products, but to just kind of try to educate yourself on what's on the forefront of, the aesthetic sort of response.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I hate speaking up for people who do permits because I know that they're probably the most hated people in any community. But, there's a reason they exist, and when they act in good faith, they're actually probably saving your life.
Oh, yeah.
So don't add a wooden trellis after your project has been approved.
Right.
Just don't do that. Just
Right.
don't do that.
No.
Laura.
Well, I agree. I think for anyone starting to say, what is this? I think there are so many wonderful resources there, and there are some that are better than others, and how that integrates in the common conversations of wellness, sustainability, green, zero waste. These are all these buzzwords that are happening in social media, and they're happening on the internet, and it's really hard to navigate that. So go to the ones that are really, the Wellness Institute, and the go right online and look up the codes. Go to your local city and look up and see what's there. And I think that's always going to be an important part. More information, the better we can do as a community. And I say really, to your point, look to local education and look to local providers for, resiliency. If we demand a higher, more pretty product that has the same properties and principles and perform the same, then why wouldn't we go to our vendors and work towards developing this? As designers, we have a voice that can develop beautiful new products because we're boots to the ground with the customer. And then talking to the architects and collaborating with, hey, listen, we want to work together to build a resilient home. Here's what the client is saying to me, and here's what they're saying to you, and how can we make those two worlds come together? But I do think that, go online and find, the UBC, IBC, you can go on Well Building Institute, and look it up and just find out.
Yeah.
There's one website I love, which is Ecotape, and they have so much information about insulation, but their blog is really great and really entertaining and fun to read, but it actually gives you a lot of information about things you can do in your home right now. And as builders, we can start employing those principles.
Right, absolutely. And to any manufacturers who are here in this audience, I would say invest in providing that information to your customers and your clients, because it'll pay you back in loyalty, in becoming a resource for them in their work. So it's really important. People who put that information out there, they build that loyal kind of base, or people who are willing to learn from them. So thank you so much for that, Shannon.
So you said at the beginning that maybe it sounds like a downer of a topic, but what I'm excited about is that we are each other's resilience, and that we can leverage each other's bodies of knowledge to work together to make sure that the people that we're serving are using us as a point of contact to better understand how they can be safer, how their families can be safer, and how potentially their properties can stand alone in the face of these disasters. And also, beauty is a science. So it's not unhackable. We can make these resilient solutions beautiful. It's happening already. If you see Christopher's slides, you can see it's happening. If you see Laura's work, it's happening. Already there are gorgeous solutions on the strongest houses that are built for their environment with a lot of thought and care put in, and certainly to meet the minimum standard of our local codes.
Right, absolutely. Laurie, any tips on how people can take away resilient thinking from here?
Definitely. I think it starts with you, and it starts with me. And if you take care of yourself, I think the first step into resilience is wellness. If you get your own inventory done at your house, how many of you guys have ever inventoried your house? Anybody? Guys, I'm so proud of you. This is so important. If something happens in your region, you are the first person that your clients are going to reach out to if you're in the trades. So if you take care of your own self, take care of your own business, make sure your insurance is updated, take care of your own home, then you are going to be in a great position if something happens in your region that you can take care of your clients and your community. So I think it truly does begin with You also learn so much as you go through it. Updating your insurance, well, everything you went through, you can explain it to your client, right? When you do these things, it goes forward with you. So I think if you start with you, that's how to me, I think that's the beginning of all resilience for design and building.
Absolutely. I'm gonna open up one last time. If anybody else wants to jump in or ask a question of the panel, we're open to take comments or suggestions or questions from you guys. So if anybody wants to jump in, yeah, go ahead. That's a great question. I'm going to repeat that on the mic so everybody can hear. She asked, how has the spirit of resiliency inspired you creatively as architects and designers? So how does something like resilience, which we started out saying is a bit of a downer, how can it be an impetus for more creative work? Thank you for that question.
Can I just say,
That's
in
great.
historic remodel, that was a major mind bender for me after having seen what happened. So there hadn't been a wildfire in that area for 95 years, and a lot of those historic homes were lost, and it really put a humongous pressure on me to study the beauty science and figure out how am I going to help every other house I get to touch around here, how am I going to help that not happen? How am I going to help that not happen going forward? And for a minute there, I was like, can I even continue in historic renovation? And the answer was yes, but there was a lot of very focused thought and very focused research on how am I going to help that survive. I'm glad you asked that. Thank you for that question.
For me, it's just about I'm inspired by the idea of longevity. I'm inspired of the legacy of that, and so I think the spirit of resiliency comes down to what I do in my consulting work, which is work with mental illness in youth in the homes and trying to help manifest a healthier home in that respect. So that was my conduit to get to resiliency as in building materials. So, but resiliency is a mindset, and I think it's a word that's just so huge that we tend to try to find the tail of the kite. We try to find what does it really mean? But it means something different for everybody. But I think being strong in the face of adversity or in the face of any kind of weather or the face of any kind of loss is always a good thing. And I think if you look that spirit of standing up to with the purpose of creating longevity and a legacy, that's what inspires my work. That makes it thoughtful.
I would kind of chime in on that too. Thank you for the question. That's my beautiful wife down there keeping the conversation going. So, yeah, I mean, for us, resiliency, the social responsible, aspect of what we do as designers, it is important to think about how the home's gonna look and operate in 50 years or 70 years or 100 years is really what kind of we think of when we design these homes. So a lot of it has to do with the building materials. Something's happening to my mic, but
there it is.
we pick the highest standards we can for certain materials. Like we do all copper flashing, and we think about water intrusion with all of the doors and windows, and we just really try to, but also just think about, what does this house, what does it show, especially in Malibu as we're putting back a brand new home? What does it say about an area that's obviously very prone to wildfires? We have to think about the exterior of these homes. They say things. We have to think about that.
Do we have anything else from anybody? Any comments, suggestions, questions? Well, I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you all so much for doing this. Resilience, as we said, you said it's a mindset, and there's really no better way of thinking about it. And I think we do have to start from that personal place. But knowing that, if you are doing your due diligence to keep your family, your home, and your sort of life that you've built, or your office or your workplace safe, then actually you're doing a service to the community, even in just selfishly looking out for yourself. Because, for instance, I was a member of a jury on an ASID competition last year, and one of the honorable mentions we gave was for a home where they had built on the edge of a natural reserve in a fire-prone area, and they'd built their home to be the fire break for the community that lay beyond. And we just thought that was just an incredible act of generosity, And so sometimes even in just looking out for your own property or your own life, you can actually be a source of strength and a source of resilience for the community. And the more you learn, even if it's just to save your own skin, the more you might end up saving the lives of others, right? And that's the beauty of resilience. So thank you all so much for joining me. This has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you all for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.
I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks so much.